not used in the professional scene. Unless you're you have some dedicated build and you're denying scouting, but it's not a build. I'm just saying, this is how you counter a build that's not a build, right? Like, it's not a real build. It's what people do, but it's the lack of a build that makes people do it. So, okay, there are builds where you can skip Stargate, but you can go Dark Templar, right? And that's different. You can go for a Dark Archon build, and that's completely different. Or you could do Zealots, 4-gate Zealots into double Archon, and then you do a counterattack. So, I mean, that's a build too, you know what I mean? Like, going for the Archon and whatnot, so... It's probably not a great build, but it is, it's an okay build. But most people don't know how to do that. Like, people who actually go Gateway and skip Stargate, like, they do it because they're just trying to be a complete clown, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's like a... I guess if you have a really smart player doing it, they can account for the anti-air and the timings. But a really smart player would hardly do that build unless they're like pulling it out for a tournament and, you know, maybe you're on a map or a position where your opponent can't scout you. So that's a different scenario where you're able to shield their vision and then you can kind of do a little surprise attack in a one-off tournament game. But it's not something that you want to replicate, like seriously. So let's go over some Protoss builds. And then we'll kind of talk through the... Oh, my Nexus is late, sorry. Talk through the rationale for like what a Protoss needs to do in order to account for Zerg's builds, right? So this is the 1313. A pretty safe build, but obviously it's weak to 9-pull. But a lot of Zergs don't really go 9-pull, especially on Sylphid, but it's possible. Let's assume our opponent's here, there's an overpull opening. Again, I think the best way to learn Zerg is to learn Protoss. Like, you have to learn Protoss' builds in order to, you know, do just this. So, I'll kind of do my optimized timing build, my 2-base all-in for Plump, and I'll show you why it's a really abusive build, I think. So we have that. So whenever you go for 13 Nexus like this, you don't need a second pylon, right? Because your Nexus is going to finish. Although my Nexus was a little bit late, so that's why. And then from here, we want to make non-stop Zealots, okay? And then I'm going to hold the gas until a little bit later. So... the pylon, and then again make sure the Zealots are non-stop, okay? So this is a very fast speed Zealot push. It's a little abusive, and I kind of crafted this build because of my knowledge of Zerg. Okay, so right when your thing is done, I actually get a Citadel first and then a Stargate. So that's the key thing, right? Like, once Protoss kind of like get to a certain level where they start fiddling with like these kinds of things, most of the time the Protoss will go for the Stargate first, and then if it's a Templar timing, they'll get the Citadel shortly after the Stargate. But if it's a Zealot timing, they'll get the Citadel after the Stargate is complete, right? So after the Stargate is complete, you get Citadel, you get +1, and then you have leg upgrades at 730, right? This build is a little bit different. It's very abusive in the sense that if you have the economy with the 12, 13, 13, you can get the Citadel and the Stargate at the same time. So you have the anti-air ready for mutas, but you also have leg upgrades as well. The area where I'm cutting in order to afford this, if you notice, is I don't have my gas yet, okay? Some builds go for a gas a little bit later, but you'll see here I'm gonna hold the gas until 32, right? And I'm gonna make sure that I have non-stop Zealots building. So get the gas, and you'll see why I get the gas, or well, 31, similar. And then I'll get a second pylon. And scouting, let's assume that we're fighting against things here. So let's get leg upgrades as soon as we can. I'm supply blocked a little bit, unfortunately. That's okay. Then we got a Stargate. And we want to have non-stop probes, non-stop zealots, and make sure you don't get supply blocked. Yeah, this is a no +1 build. This is intentionally no +1 build, so you can afford the Stargate at the same time. Okay, so I have the first one coming out. Right, and then you get the second Corsair. This is out in scouting, okay? And then once you have 5 zealots, you should move out, okay? 5 zealots, move out. Oh, my +1 is a little late. I'm supposed to get my +1 later, but my +1's a little later. Sorry about that. I think that's what Cat's Paw was talking about. And then when you move out, you have to watch out for the counter here. And then you want to get your Templar Archives at 6:30 at the latest. So you block that. And so this is really powerful, right? So, like, as we're doing this, yeah, my +1 was a little late, but my +1 is not supposed to be in time for this. My +1 is supposed to be roughly at around 5:30 with this build, so that I can afford the gas and I could go for the Stargate. So you get the Stargate, you scout. I'm not getting +1, so I'm actually skipping the like Corsair production, at least for +1. And I could make Corsairs on site if I see mutas, but I won't have +1 air weapons. But that's okay, because a lot of Zergs in this situation, if they see a Corsair, if they're fighting early gate pressure, then a lot of times they won't think to go mutas, right? Because unless they kill your Corsairs, okay? So a lot of times they're trying to get on with their build, they're trying to make Hydras, and so that's why this is to me, this is an abusive build, right? Because you're basically banking on the fact that Zergs won't be able to like have the mental like aptitude to actually like stop this. But remember, this zealot timing is hitting at 6:30, right? And remember back then in the other game before this, you had scourges out here and your scourges were scouting the builds. This is really strong because once the zealots get to their base, they have to force sunken colonies, right? The sunken colonies can stop this with lings because I don't have +1 upgraded zealots, right? So lings are actually good against this, but a lot of times this makes Zergs panic and then they'll make sunken colonies. So if they have 2 sunken colonies made, just turn around and run home. If they don't, you should try to do damage, and then back at home, you're making non-stop probes and you're going on with your build, right? So let's just go on. Let's say my Corsairs run back home. I'm gonna make 3 Corsairs, and then let's say I'm fighting here. So let's just pretend like these are all dying, okay? Okay, so I have my Templar Archives, right? And then from here, what we want to do is we want to start pumping up our gateway count to 4 gateways, okay? So we have 1, 2, 3, and then we have 4, right? And we want to keep making probes until about 7 minutes, which is about now. And I'm going to send 1 probe back home because we want to have the right number. And then once we have that, we want to make a cannon for safety. And really, you should be scouting to see like what's going on, right? Are they going lots of Hydras? And if so, you're going to need 2 more cannons. But if not, that's okay. And then you have to make 2 High Templars. And then once you have the High Templars out, so here, we're gonna go 3 High Templars here, right? High Templar, then I'm gonna pump up to 6 gateways, okay? So after you get your High Templars and your things out, you have a Templar, and then you can get your second Forge, okay? So this timing is gonna be good, right? Because then the Dark Templar is gonna try to like poke away things. And then you just get on with your build. Again, you're making no more probes from this point on. I'd like to put my Corsairs over here, just so that, like, just in case they go mutas or something, you can defend against your mineral line. And then you pump up to 8 gateways. So you went from 4 to 6 to 8. Dark Templar should be scouting to see what's going on. And then actually, this is where the part gets really clowny, is I actually go 10 gateways with this build. And I'll get that in a bit, right? So you see how I have Storm ready, right? So let's say they're pushing out, I have Storm ready. I have 4 Storms, and so they can't really do much of anything. Now I'm just making a lot of Zealots. And now I have 8 gateways coming, right? Again, no more probes. You already, right now I already have 45 probes. I already know it. I don't need to check. I get the robotics, and then once we're ready, we'll start getting Dragoons, okay? So now is the perfect time to be making Dragoons. And then once you start doing that, you can actually pump up to 10 gateways, and this is gonna be an all-in. Okay? So the beautiful thing about this clown build is now I'm gonna pretend like I'm gonna have a third base. So right now, 9:30 is the timing that a lot of, like, what is it? A lot of times they, Zerg gets scared of a Zealot High Templar move out, okay? This build, I'm not going to do it. Why? Because I'm going for a 2-base push and I have 2 Forges spinning, right? With 2 Forges spinning, I'm gonna look to get a 2-1 timing at about 11:30. But if you're gonna go for a Zealot High Templar push at 9:30, you shouldn't get the second Forge because that's gonna slow down your push. Instead, you should just pump up to more gateways faster and make Zealots and High Templar, and then you just push them. But it's important to run out right now because Zergs are gonna be very scared at this because 9:30 is the prime time for when Zergs want to be droning, okay? You don't, for every drone that you deny by forcing a Hydra, that's okay. That's going to be very good, okay? That's going to be very good, right? You can talk about lurkers. Yeah, it's a possibility, but you should be able to scout whether or not it's going to be a lurker build. But at the same time, this is actually a hard counter to lurker contains because it's an optimized 10 gateway build, right? So anytime you have a build that's going to be 2-base, oriented, lurker contains are going to be... it shouldn't be a problem if you have good enough micro. But if they have lurkers out right now, you just have to come back home. You have to just mass up gateways. So that's a fine way to play for Zerg. But if you did damage with your first push, they can't afford the lurker contain. I mean, they could do it, but they'll get busted by this build. So basically the point is I'm going to fake the move out with the Zealots. Okay, fake the move out with the Zealots. Clear some, I'm gonna clear some, lings and stuff. I'm just gonna make pylons at the third base. Dude, we're playing Protoss. We have to be as clowny as we can, right? And you wanna make sure your High Templars don't get sniped. And so we're gonna pretend like we're making a third base, right? So if they see you moving out and they don't actually attack you, you're not attacking, they're gonna assume, okay, this guy's expanding and they're gonna drone, right? And now from here, you just have to make sure that you're clicking Dragoons and not losing your High Templars. And they're probably droning. They're probably saying, okay, this guy's gonna, not move out yet, right? And from here, you literally just make Dragoons from all of your empty gateways. And then once that's done, once the observatory is done, you obviously just want to get some observers. And then you start, don't make sure you don't get supply locked, right? And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to pump up to at least 20 Dragoons, right? If you have 20 Dragoons, that's a good recipe for a very strong timing, okay? Okay, so we're just pumping up. We have the observer. Okay, we got the observer. Once you have the observer, we just move out. Almost have 2-1 on the way. And again, it's always important to just move out to scare your opponents and make sure you babysit your High Templars, right? They're always going to be corsairs and stuff Zergs who are trying to snipe them. And this is just a really deadly timing, right? So now I have 2-1 basically done. And I have 10 gateways to stop, So you want to put your Zealots back, and then as you push in, right, and this part is really hard, right? You want to spread your goons out, get the observers, and then make sure your observers don't get sniped, and then you just storm your way in. And then again, you just macro from all these places behind, right? And then you just keep storming, and then like you inch forward, right? You start killing some of the, you know, and then you have all these zealots and you have all these reinforcements because you have 10 gateways. And once you bust down that first lurker path, then you just go in for the kill, right? Then it's just a beautiful blob of Zerg just dying like crazy, right? So this is what I think is like one of the dirtiest builds, because it like, you know, you're basically able to deal early game damage, and it takes a really good Zerg to stop this, right? So let's see. Don't Zergs usually scout your main scourge and confirm the gateway count? So the gateway count isn't really so the thing about this build, right? Yeah, let's go over the counters, okay? Let's go over the counters, right? Hey Tap, thank you for the sub. So all right. So the answer to this build is for sure mutas, okay? It's 5 mutas. It's not all mutas though, okay? But the question is, how does the Zerg know how to go mutas, right? Like what tells does this build give that prompts your opponent to go mutas, okay? You could probably check the VODs here. I mean, I guess I technically have a YouTube channel, but I don't really like update it. So the question from the Zerg end is, how do I stop this, right? How do you stop this? Okay. And right, the answer is going to be 5 mutas, but it's still going to be hard to push against it because why? Let's say you have the Overlord back at home. If you go back to the build, this is not the same as skipping Stargate, right? Because number one, a good Zerg is going to be checking for this forge, right? Usually, if they go for a 6:30 timing, the forge is going to be spinning already, right? Because they have a +1, right? So if they have +1, then you know, the +1, you know, is going to be a huge tell. But if you don't have +1 spinning, that lowers the odds that it's going to be a 6:30 timing. So that's why it's kind of confusing to a Zerg, because a lot of Zergs will look at the forge. But if you don't have +1, pro Zergs stop the zealot push with lings and drone drills, right? But that's like hard to do, I guess. You know, I guess if you're a pro, you could definitely stop it. But if you're not a pro, sometimes like the drone drills can be a little bit hard to do. And obviously zealots are pretty good units. So let's say a Zerg scouts this, right? The Zerg is going to scout a Citadel and a Stargate at the same time. And a lot of times, people don't know what to make of this, right? Because it's not that I'm getting a Stargate late, right? Because the Stargate is at the same time as all of the other builds, right? But my build is designed to literally say, okay, I'm going to get the Citadel and the Stargate at the same time so I can have +1 fast. And I'm going to force you to make a decision, right? I'm going to force you to say, you know, are you going to go mutas off of this, right? Because you can go mutas, but what this could also be is I could also go for a second Templar, right? I don't need to go for a Zealot push, and I'll have Stargates with Corsairs. So that's why it puts Zerg in a difficult spot, right? So like the mutas are for sure going to be a good response to my build, but how do they know I'm going Zealots, right? How do they know that? Because I don't have +1 spinning at the forge, right? And at the same time, how do they know I'm not going to put down a Templar Archives, right? Because if they go mutas into Templar Archives, then they're not going to get that much value because I'm going to have Stargate, I'm going to have Corsairs. So that's why, you know, you have to make the Zerg make a decision. Okay, do I need to go mutas here? And I think a really good Zerg will go mutas. I think they will if they have really good control. But the mutas will not find that much damage because I'm going to have defense and I'm going to scout it anyways. So obviously before this, Cat's Paw asked about 973. Yeah, but at this point you should already know if it's 973 with your probe scout. If they have ling speed at 5 minutes, then they can't have 973, or it's going to be really weak because they can't afford all their upgrades. But if it's 973, then you can't do this build with 973. You make one Corsair and you switch your entire direction to something else. So versus 973, there's a completely different response. But the important thing is your probe always needs to be out there, and it always needs to be looking for ling speed, right? If you can get in their main base, that's great. If you can't get in, just keep scouting their natural, because you cannot afford ling speed and go 973 at the same time. I mean, you can, but it's going to be really weak. So I think the important thing for a Zerg to always scout is always making sure that the third base is actually, it actually has a nexus. And then also, if you scout, a good Zerg will scout a second forge, right? With the second forge, you know that there's going to be a really big 2-base timing coming in, okay? And then I don't know how many other Protoss actually go for 10 gateways like me, but if they go for 8 gates and 2 forges, you can probably expect a really big push. And so for this, you want your 4th base, but you don't want to saturate. You don't want to make too many drones, right? Because you always want to make sure that you have enough, defenses. Like if they're loading up for a huge 2-base push and you don't see that they have a 3rd base, then you should not drone too hard. And I wouldn't even go hive there either. I would just make a ton of units and hope to hold, because if you hold this push, then you're probably in a pretty good spot. But yeah, you see when you cut pro production at 7 minutes, you have 40. Well, I thought I had a little bit more, but 41's the magic number. Here I have 42. That's fine. And then everything else needs to come into units. And then when you have this giant push, you just kind of go in and you just do what you can. And it's really hard for Zerg to stop. It's like the stupidest build ever. So that's why, like, as a Zerg player, you need to be loading up on units non-stop. Hope to get some good trades. Hope to snipe the observers. You gotta do some good dancing. But this to me is like a very brain dead Protoss build. And if it fails, then you just leave, right? But this push is really hard to pull off. It's like actually really difficult. As strong as it seems, it's really hard to pull off. All right, I've always... When to stop pro production? Every minute? No, it's not every matchup. It's always dependent on the, like your build, right? You don't always... I think for this build that I'm doing, I'm going for a 2-base all-in, right? And with 2-base all-in, you don't want to make too many probes because you don't have units, right? But if you're gonna play a longer game and you're not necessarily going 2-base all in, you're just going for like a regular 2-base push, then you should keep making probes, because once you start getting to your 3rd and your 4th base, you want at least, I think 65 probes is a pretty good place to be at, right? 65 probes. And so usually I start remaking probes when I start making my 3rd base, if I need to. But before that, if I'm just optimizing for a 2-base build, then 2-base all-in, then I'm just going to stop at 41, which is around 7 minutes. But in like PvT, that's not true, right? I mean, unless you're going for a 2-base all-in for PvT, you should stop at around 7 minutes. But most games are not like that. I think you're supposed to keep making probes until like 9 to 10 minutes, right? 9 to 10 minutes probably gets you around 65. So 65 is probably around the magic number, somewhere like 60 to 70 for a late game. Probe to